Welcome to In the Workshop. This one's called Ryan's Allchin Traction Engine. Working on a 1.5 inch scale Allchin Traction Engine, putting right some minor faults and fitting some cylinder drains. Yes, I know they are really called cylinder drain cocks, but when I put that in text form on the videos, from my experience, YouTube's algorithms would flag the video as being unsuitable for advertising. Time to get on with the show, and here is Ryan's traction engine sat in a blue plastic box, and it's a perfect fit. This is a very well made traction engine. It was built by his grandfather, who obviously knew what he was doing, but unfortunately is no longer around to give Ryan any advice on it. Quite a while back now, Ryan contacted me to ask if he could bring up the traction engine for me to sort out. But owing to the COVID-19 lockdown structure, this was impossible, and it's only now that it could happen. It all started when Ryan contacted me asking me if I could make an adapter to fit a whistle on top of the cylinder. I did this and posted it to him. There was no contact at all. But there was a bit of a curious problem. Where the whistle fits, it is after the regulator. So to blow the whistle, what you have to do is put the engine in mid-gear, open the regulator, then you can blow the whistle. The only other idea would have been to externally pipe the whistle, and that wouldn't have looked very good. Even though this little whistle works fine, it's really a cosmetic accessory. After a quick visual inspection, I could see that this traction engine was very well made. Time to take it out of the blue box and put it on the bench. And now I can take a much closer look. First impressions, yes, it's quite good. The paintwork is not too bad for its age, the wheels are nicely lined. At some stage in its life, the winch cable guide bracket has been bent, but that's not the end of the world. Underneath the coal in the bunker is the hand pump. I think the hand pump is a Stuart Turner type, but I'm not 100% sure. The engine also has a crankshaft-driven water pump. It doesn't have an injector, but if the crankshaft-driven pump fails, then you've always got the hand pump. And once you refit the coal, you'd never know there was one in there. I have a 1.5 inch scale Showman's engine, and the hand pump on that is really clever. It's a vertical hand pump, and on the top of the ram is a shaped tractor-type seat that you move up and down to pump water into the boiler. There are a list of jobs that need doing on this traction engine, so this is the first one. The ashpan was held in place using 2 rivets, and this is not a good idea. You can't use a long dump pin because the holes don't line up. So I threaded the holes in the ashpan assembly itself 4BA. Then I just drilled out the holes on the side plates using a 9/64 drill, which is quite a tight clearance size for 4BA. These hands are not mine, they are Ryan's hands. You can tell because he's wearing a yellow wristwatch, and both of his hands are much cleaner than mine. In no time at all, Ryan screwed in a 4BA bolt at each side. The bolts that he just fitted were shorter than the ones I showed in the first clip. One of the first jobs that Ryan mentioned was that the water gauge didn't seem to work properly and it was very dirty. This is a common problem, and my 4.5 inch scale Burrell Showman's engine had the same problem when it was delivered from the steam workshop. It's usually a simple fix. I unscrewed the tap at the bottom, which is in the form of a bolt. This water gauge does not have a blowdown valve. Unsurprisingly, when I removed the plug, very little water came out of the hole. This can be for a couple of reasons. If the water gauge is blocked, obviously the water will not come out of the hole. Also, if the regulator is closed, the water in the boiler will be reluctant to leave because of the vacuum created. I'm using a piece of silver solder to poke through the water gauge fitting all the way into the boiler. Once I'd done that, a little more water started to drip out of the water gauge at the bottom. The next job was to remove the top plug, which was actually made of mild steel, which is not good. This was clearly blocked. Once I cleared it, quite a lot of water immediately started to run out of the bottom part of the water gauge. This, by the way, is not the water gauge, this is the boiler blowdown valve. I suggested to Ryan that he opened it to drain the boiler. While Ryan was doing this, I removed the top fitting of the water gauge and used a pipe cleaner to clean the glass. Then I replaced the top cap, Ryan closed the blowdown valve, and I connected a pipe from the pump on my model aircraft power panel to the inlet pipe of the hand pump. I think it's time for a really useful tip. On this traction engine, the inlet to the hand pump is on the back. That's the brass bit that's sticking out of the bunker. That's where I fitted the pipe from my power panel pump, the other end went into a water bottle, and that's how I filled the boiler. In the valve chest of a hand pump are two stainless steel balls, and both of them sit over holes inside the chest. If you connect compressed air or pressurized water to the inlet pipe, then both of the ball valves lift and allow the admission of compressed air or water into the boiler. This can also be useful for freeing the stainless steel balls if they're stuck on the seats, which happens frequently if the engine hasn't been run for a while. Here's a shot of the motion work, and as you can see, it's very nicely made. There is a very small pin that fits in the gear selector lever, but unfortunately I dropped it on the floor and Ryan found it later. This pin is essential when running the engine on the bench or running it when it's stood still, because you do not want to engage the gears by accident. That would not be good. Once I speeded up the engine, it developed a pronounced knock. This was nothing to do with the crankshaft bearings, which are technically perfect. As is usually the case, it's caused by two things, one being wear of the big end or small end, or the valve timing being out. In this case it was a combination of the two. When I put a load on the flywheel, the tone of the knocking changed, so mainly it's the big end I think. I checked the valve timing, and yes, it was a bit retarded at both ends. As Ryan had driven all the way from St Austell in Cornwall up to York, we only really had the one day to work on it. He came up the day before and stayed in a Travelodge, and arrived with the traction engine on the next day. This is the next day, and now it's about 12:30. Because of the time constraints, I decided not to go down the obsessive adjust the valve timing route. Instead, I used this. What did I do with this? Well, let's keep that my little secret. It's a very small hammer, but I do not want to encourage any viewers to use hammers on their model steam engines. Here I'm checking the wear on the rest of the motion, and there is some, but not enough to worry about. Then Ryan dropped the bombshell. Can you fit some drain cocks to the engine? This took me completely by surprise, and at first I didn't want to do it. The two holes in the cylinder were partially drilled and partially threaded, 5/32 of an inch by 40 threads per inch. In the end I said, well, okay, but if it's problematic and it goes wrong, you will have to leave the engine with me. So armed only with my Proxxon motor tool fitted with a tapping size drill, I drilled out the holes and threaded them the required size. In my box of old cylinder drain cocks I found these two from a steam locomotive. It took a while to find them because they are actually handed in sets of 4. These two open the valves when the arm is to the right. Once the drain cocks were fitted and working, Ryan then said, could I make a lever to operate them? So I did, and here it is, a piece of scrap brass bent at one end, with 2 holes in it to accept 10 BA bolts. These are very small, and these days I have to do it by feel because I can't see things this small without a head magnifier. In the end we used a pair of surgical forceps. Ryan had one of them and I had the other. And very soon everything was fine and worked perfectly. I put a very small blob of super glue on the thread behind the nut, behind the levers. The final job was to make a towing hitch that was better than the rivet that he was using. I quickly turned this up in the lathe more or less freehand, and then using Ryan's really good blowtorch, because he is a plumber, I heated the part that needed bending and very carefully bent it in the vise. And this is what it looked like before I cleaned it up. I'm going to hand you over to Ryan now. Here is fitting the wooden board at the side, using my Barco spanner, which is miles too big for the job. And that's about it. A very interesting day and very enjoyable. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. It's goodbye from me and goodbye from Ryan. Please take the time to visit my main Steam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.